What's up, guys? It's Benny. Tucker Carlson had a must-watch live stream that he broadcast last night, speaking with historian Daryl Cooper about who Jeffrey Epstein really was. And it's a fascinating 3-hour conversation. We've watched all of it, and we just want to narrow in on one very important element that only Tucker Carlson would ask about when it comes to the sordid Epstein affair. And that question is, why? We know that Jeffrey Epstein was a monster. We know what he did to children and young girls, some as young as the age of 12. We know that Jeffrey Epstein got away with it. This is well documented. You can see the documents. It's not even up for debate. But the question is, why? Why did this happen? What type of person allows this to happen? And what type of person staffs our federal government's top echelons in order to allow for it to continue, to protect it, and to enable this type of behavior? To what end? This is a fascinating conversation. We're just going to zoom in on one part of it. First, the protection mechanisms for Jeffrey Epstein. What were his crimes, especially when he caught a case in Palm Beach? This was in the year 2016 through 2008. And what happened next? Did you know the authorities were tipped off to Jeffrey Epstein's crimes? Nothing happened? That his house was scrubbed clean by the time they got there? That it was an inside job the entire time? Your blood will boil. Listen to this.
But through Maxwell, story goes, she would go out and she would identify a girl who, very often was from a broken family or from, no father in the picture. Was very important because fathers tend to beat the hell out of, 40-year-old guys who sexually assault their daughters. And so you find these girls who kind of already have like some problems, and you would bring them in to give them a massage. Say, look, he's this wealthy guy. He's very interesting. He just likes to get massages. He'll pay you $200 to give him a massage. Don't you want to just make $200? Back in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, a lot of money for a high school girl, especially from the wrong side of the tracks. And so some of them would, I presume, say no, but others would go do it. And once they found ones that they liked who kind of fit the profile, then they would outsource the recruitment to those girls. And it was actually one instance, in fact, where the girl, when they tried to assault her, because, they'd start out with the massage and then they would go from there. And the girls at this point, you're in this billionaire's house, isolated behind a gate. And what are you going to do? They don't, it's a scary situation for a high school girl, obviously. A lot of the people who look at the situation, and I tend to find I guess it's not strange when you really think about it, but when I talk to men about this, they're like, kill that guy, just get rid of that guy. When you talk to women about it, I find that they're a little bit more punitive in their view. And maybe that's just because...
What was she doing there?
Yeah, they remember being 15 and they're like, I wasn't just some purely innocent dove at 15.
Well, men are protective as they should be of women.
And so there was one girl who, she did react that way. She, she refused to do anything. And they said, well, okay, it's all right. It's all right. We still think you're awesome. We want to get massages and everything. I'll tell you what, you don't have to do anything. But we'll give you $200 for every one of your friends that you bring. If you find others, you bring them in to do this, and we'll give them $200. You'll get $200 every time you do it. And she did it. And those girls, really kind of sickeningly, and I think, they were kind of portrayed in the press as like prostitution solicitors, and kind of, these are minors, these are high school girls being manipulated by adults who very skillfully manipulated billionaires. You know what I mean? So that's just a ridiculous idea to like place a responsibility on them. Kind of a sick thing to write in a newspaper, honestly. But and so they would do that. And, that's sort of ensured. I mean, the girl who is from a broken family and has some problems from the wrong side of the tracks, she might know a girl who is from an intact, middle-class family with two concerned parents. But very often her friends are kind of from the same mold that she's from. Every once in a while they weren't, though. And this is part of how he got caught, is one of the girls that they brought in, they had a father. They had a mother who cared, and they had a pretty regular family who, after everything was over, she ran back to them and told them all about it, and they went to the police. And so the West Palm Beach, this was down in Florida, the West Palm Beach Police Department starts looking into the guy, starts gathering more information, starts talking to more witnesses. And very quickly, this thing starts expanding out so that 2 witnesses becomes 4, and 4 becomes 8, and 8 becomes 16. It's like expanding a lot, and they're realizing they have a big issue on their hands. And as they're going through, the Netflix documentary, it leaves out a lot of really important information, but it's really good on this stuff. They interview like the chief of police in West Palm Beach there at the time, and you can see he is just flabbergasted, outraged, just... to the point where, he says at one point that it cost him his faith in the U.S. criminal justice system, because he was getting stonewalled like crazy at the local level. People in his department or somewhere in the local government were leaking the information of the investigation to Jeffrey Epstein. So, for example, when they raided his house, finally went in there and all the computers had been taken away. It was totally ready for the raid and prepared for it. Everything was removed. And he was 100% tipped off, they say.
Once Epstein is arrested, the cover-up begins almost immediately, with honest prosecutors trying to figure out why this man, this monster, isn't put away for life and quickly. It's enraging when you hear what punishment Jeffrey Epstein was given, and also what unbelievable protections were allowed for his criminal network. Here we go.
She goes to her bosses and she kind of grills them a little bit, like, what the hell is going on here? You know what? She wrote this in an email, actually. She was very aggressive about it, though. She's like, I don't know what's happening here. I don't know what the deal is, but like we have a child predator on our hands with an open and shut case to put this guy away for the rest of our life. What is the problem here? And she gets reprimanded and told in no uncertain terms, your attitude is not appreciated and you need to back off and all these kind of things by her superior. And so then one day, and this is while the subpoena's out for those computers, Alex Acosta personally goes and cuts a deal with Epstein's lawyers without telling the lead prosecutor who's looking into the case, without telling the victims, which is in contravention of victims' rights law. You know, if you're going to cut a deal with a sex offender, you got to tell the victims, hey, by the way, this is what's happening. Here's why we're doing it. And just so you know, he's going to be out of jail in a year or something. You have to tell them. It's a law.
This guy wind up as labor secretary.
That is a story worth looking into. I don't know. But
a lot of candidates for the gig.
So
that guy?
Yeah, he comes in.
Sorry.
And he cuts a deal with the lawyers that says that the federal government agrees not to prosecute Epstein for any of the crimes that are being alleged, any related crimes that have yet to be alleged, nor will they prosecute any of his accomplices, known or unknown. So crimes that come out in the future committed by people who aren't known about yet, those are covered under this immunity as well, right? It's the most blanket you can possibly imagine. And as a condition of the deal, the subpoena for his computers was dropped. Okay.
So it sounds like they intentionally didn't gather a lot of evidence.
100%.
So this is relevant. The reason I'm bringing it up is there's this, I said I wouldn't talk about contemporary politics, but there's this huge controversy over why isn't the DOJ releasing all this information? And my informed understanding is, at least to some extent, because they don't have it, and they don't have it because it was never gathered. And I don't know why nobody has said that publicly. I'm not making excuses for anybody, by the way, but it's just really interesting. So the cover-up began immediately.
100%, and went all the way up to the federal level.
Do you know that Epstein, when he was awaiting sentencing after being convicted of child predation, was allowed, they didn't even take his passport, he was allowed to travel internationally, and he traveled to Israel, where he was thinking about potentially never returning so that he would never have to be punished for his crimes. It's a big question, like, why exactly did he return? And more importantly, why are pederasts allowed to live out their days in Israel away from American law enforcement or the law enforcement of the countries in which they've offended? That's a good question. Here we go.
Before Jeffrey Epstein was sentenced, for whatever reason, you have this billionaire who's just the definition of a flight risk. They don't take his passport away. And before he's sentenced, he flees the country, goes to Israel and stays there for several months. He moved all his money offshore by this point. And while he's in Israel, he's telling people there that he's thinking about staying, because you can actually do that. They don't extradite, Jewish criminals, at least, who flee to Israel. There's an organization called Jewish Community Watch, which is a Jewish organization that tracks pedophiles who have fled the United States to go to Israel, where there's no extradition of Jewish criminals there. And between just the years, I think it was 2010 when they opened up, and 2016, 2017 when this story was written, so a period of 6 years, there were already 60 pedophiles from the United States that had fled to Israel and were living freely there. Some of them had reoffended there and got thrown in Israeli jails. But so this is a thing, and Jeffrey Epstein was over there.
Why doesn't the U.S. government demand the government of Israel send them back?
You've been self-employed for a while, but when you weren't, was it your habit to go to your boss and make demands of them on a regular basis? I don't know. I mean, since when do we ever make demands on Israel? It's been a long time.
I don't know, but I that's obviously distressing. So, okay. So there's clearly a cover up at the very beginning. And I just want to say again, I think that's not the totality of, but one of the reasons we don't have this information now is because DOJ doesn't have the information.
Can I tie up that last point real quick?
Please.
Just a second. So him being in Israel and at least having the threat of staying there, that may have played a role in him cutting his deal, because that's when his deal was cut.
He's already been charged at this point.
He's awaiting sentencing.
He's been convicted?
And they don't take his passport, and he leaves the country.
He's been convicted and he leaves the country?
Correct. And his plea deal, let me back that up. His plea deal was negotiated while he was out of the country, because he didn't fight the charges. It didn't go to trial, to a jury trial or anything. He was out of the country, and his lawyers could credibly go to the DOJ.
Say that is special treatment. Did any of the J6 defendants get treatment like that?
No, I don't think so.
That's what's infuriating about all this, leaving aside a lot of other elements that are upsetting. But the most infuriating is just the two tiers or multi-tier system of justice.
But here is where the conversation really gets to the brass tacks, where the rubber hits the roads, where they hit the bricks, is the question of spirit cooking and demonic and satanic activities here, the kind of activities that you would have to delight in order to allow and enable a Jeffrey Epstein, or to be a compatriot with a Jeffrey Epstein, to be somebody who's engaging as well. I mean, do you have a child abuse artwork hanging in your household? If you got on a plane and a bunch of little girls came out in their underwear to give massages, like, what would you do, right? Of course, if you visited somebody's house or home or island, or found out that these things were going on, you probably don't know anybody who owns an island. I don't know anybody who owns an island. But if you found these things out, then you'd no doubt say, well, wait a second, I'm in the wrong place. I need to call the authorities. I need to get the hell out of here. I need to throw you out of this plane. But none of Jeffrey Epstein's friends did that. So who are these elites? Tucker Carlson and Daryl Cooper are going in on exposing who these people actually are.
And can I say one thing that has always struck me about this case, and why I think it's like revealing of the entire power structure of the United States? Epstein, and there was public testimony from women who lived with Epstein to this effect. His contempt for Americans, sort of normal, middle class, working class Americans, he did not see them as fully human. He didn't, and at all. So it's like molesting, a high school girl from housing development or a trailer park in South Florida. It doesn't really count as molesting because she's a prole. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
And that attitude suffuses our leadership class. Like, that is their attitude. Yeah, 100,000 people die of fentanyl ODs. Yeah, but I mean, people. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, it's sad, but it's not an emergency because they're like people you would never meet and you don't really care about. It's building their fucking dollar store in their town, and like nobody cares about them. He really had that attitude, but that's the attitude they all have.
He had justification for having that attitude in terms of the impunity with which he operated. And this is actually something I was hoping.
Okay, so the story, just based on available facts, which are a minority of all facts about it, but just what we have, it's like, it's a true indictment.
You remember back when the Podesta emails came out and the whole Pizzagate thing took over the internet for a while. Every dark corner, the Reddit and everything else was all this satanic pedophile conspiracy, et cetera, called Pizzagate.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not going to get into the conspiracy theory itself. I'm just going to use it to raise a larger point about what we're talking about here. The interesting thing to me about that whole saga was not the idea that there's some big crazy conspiracy involving just any of that stuff. That's just whatever. That's what the internet does with information like that. The interesting thing to me was the things that were just 100% fact, the bits and pieces of the story that they were using to construct that narrative. The pieces themselves are really interesting. One of the first things that came up as people started digging into those on Reddit and everywhere else and really going into it, one of the things is everybody remembers hearing about spirit cooking. The performance artist Marina Abramovich did this event that the Podestas were invited to and apparently enjoyed very much, called spirit cooking. And what, pray tell, is spirit cooking, Tucker? It was a performance art piece, a dinner event, where the attendees would go and sit in rooms with white walls and eat meals off of mock corpses in tubs of blood with weird, creepy messages about cutting the finger on your left hand and eating the pain and drinking fresh breast milk with fresh sperm milk on earthquake nights, all these crazy edgelord art school, things that are kind of just embarrassing. But, these weird cryptic sayings written in goat's blood on the walls. In one room, there's an effigy of an infant with a bucket of goat's blood thrown all over it. There's another room where there's a bunch of shelves with little figures put in various positions of copulation. There's photos from these events that Abramovich would put on. Lady Gaga's there eating off of one of these mock corpses. Gwen Stefani's at one of them. And, they're there at these places where, forget about, people want to say, oh, this is a satanic ritual. Forget about all that. Forget about all that. Just think about, like, if this was your friend or your brother or your sister and they went to this thing, or they brought you to this thing, you'd be like, what are we doing here? What is this exactly? Right. And so the next thing that came out,
wouldn't you run immediately?
So, again, you would, I would, everybody we know would, everybody.
And Tony and Heather Podesta went to this.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if Heather did or not, but he and John did. And so Tony's a big art collector.
Oh, I'm aware. Okay. Yeah, I knew his wife.
Yeah, and his art collection became a big part of the whole Pizzagate.
This is
story.
like right in my neighborhood, by the way, where I live.
So,
which is so weird.
Tony Podesta's taste in art became a big part of that whole Pizzagate story. And it's one of those things that, again, when you have gaps to fill in a story and just pieces of information, you're not getting any explanations from anybody that make any sense, explaining it to you in a way that's plausible. That's how conspiracy theories grow like mold, right?
If something like that is going on in your city, if like some of the most powerful people in your city are participating in something like that, I don't need to know anymore.
Yeah.
I literally don't need to know anymore. Like, that's just...
I told you earlier that I made the point of going and buying the copy of Architectural Digest and Washington Life magazine that profiled his apartment and his art collection. And on the walls, in the photographs, in these magazines, okay, there's a lot of different art there, but like the most prominent one's a mural size centerpiece of a room. The others are poster size, like big, important, prominent pieces that he's got out for everybody to see, are by a Serbian artist named Biljana Đurđević. And they're part of a series of paintings that, according to the artist's own interviews are based on explorations of child molestation, sexual assault, and just childhood trauma and abuse in general. And it is, there are a lot of paintings in the series, but the ones that show up in the magazine piece, for example, the great big mural one, is a bunch of young girls. They look like maybe teenagers, 12-year-olds or something, who are lying in a circle. It's called Synchronized Swimming is the name of the painting, lying in a circle at the bottom of like a tiled room or something. And they all have this spaced out, kind of dead, drugged out look in their eyes. And some of them have black eyes, and they're just sort of laying there. And so
I don't want to be ruled by people like this.
Well, so let me just keep, because this gets so much worse.
Oh, you're upsetting me, because I lived
know.
in this world for so long, and I intentionally ignored this. But now that you are describing it, I'm like, I can't even believe I was in the same county as people like that.
I would look, if I was into art that featured tied up prepubescent children in their underwear by an artist that says this is all about child sexual assaults, what the series of paintings is about. If I was into that, I would at least take it all down before company came over. These were rooms that he threw his parties in. He invited people over to. I would definitely take them down before Architectural Digest.
But if you were into them, like let me just be clear, being into something like that means that you are on an evil path. That's evil. I don't know what to say. Like an image like that, it's also obvious now that I have distance from it. That's bad.
He was asked in an interview about some of his favorite artists. One of them that he listed was a woman named Patricia Piccinini, who does, I guess, sculptures, you would say. I don't know if they're clay sculptures or whatever, and they're really grotesque images of, a small girl standing up on her bed, maybe 5 years old, with this demon thing with its claws around her, kind of leering at her. There's one with this sort of weird pig monster spooning this little boy in his bed with pustules on its back. There's a lot of mouths that look like sphincters and vaginas, and the kids are playing with them. It's all very suggestive, weird, surrealist horror movie, kind of sexually slanted stuff. He listed her as one of his favorite artists. Another one that he listed was a woman named Kim Noble. And I'll stop roasting you out with it.
You're upsetting me because you're describing Tony Podesta, who is the brother of the former White House Chief of Staff, two-time Chief of Staff John Podesta. But Tony Podesta is the most powerful Democratic lobbyist in Washington. This is not some fringe character. It's not a homeless guy, not even some like eccentric rich guy. This is a person who's at the center of the Democratic establishment in the
decades.
city. For my whole life there.
Yeah.
And his wife is, they've since divorced, but she's like, look, pull up a picture of those two on Google and just look at it and ask yourself, is that, like, how brainwashed would you have to be not to see there's something really wrong there? Really wrong. Like deeply wrong, spiritually wrong. I'm not trying to be judgmental or cruel. I don't understand how that could exist at the very center of power in Washington, D.C. That's I just feel it so deeply.
This gets to the question.
I cannot emphasize enough how much I encourage you to watch this full podcast. It's remarkable, and it is thorough, and there is so much that is presented here, and none of it is speculation. All of it is public record, and nobody has taken the time to actually explain it to you. And we're thankful for Tucker and his channel, and for Daryl Cooper for doing that. Godspeed to both of them. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the truth to come out about Epstein. It's your boy Benny. Like, share, and subscribe. See ya.